In the warm embrace of summer, Key Harbor was a paradise of sunlit shores and swaying palm trees, where the rhythmic sound of waves caressing the coastline created a soothing melody. Residents enjoyed the heat, their days marked by outdoor cookouts and leisurely hours by the sea. But as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, an unsettling chill crept into the air, hinting at an approaching storm. On the night before what should have been another perfect summer evening, the weather reports mentioned an unexpected cold front moving in. Sam, a longtime resident, brushed it off as an exaggerated forecast. Florida was known for its scorching temperatures, not sudden cold spells. He had no idea that this time, the predictions were accurate. As midnight arrived, the first snowflakes drifted down, turning the familiar scenery into an unbelievable winter landscape. What started as a light dusting quickly intensified into a powerful storm, covering the town in a thick layer of white. The island's lush greens vanished under a surreal blanket, and the warmth of summer gave way to an unforgiving frost. In the middle of this chaos, Sam would wake to a world completely transformed, where the ordinary became extraordinary, and survival would take center stage. The storm of the century was just beginning, bringing with it unseen dangers hidden within the darkness, waiting to emerge. It was freezing. Sam awoke trembling, his breath forming mist in the frigid air. Why was it so unbearably cold? It made no sense. Key Harbor was known for its warm summers, not icy mornings. Rushing out of bed, Sam grabbed his robe, though it provided little comfort against the freezing air. Barefoot, he hurried to the hallway thermostat. The wooden floor felt like ice beneath his feet. 32 degrees? That couldn't be real. But the cold told him otherwise. When was the last time Florida had seen temperatures like this, especially in August? He switched on the heater, and the house let out a groan as the furnace sputtered to life. It had probably been over 10 years since it was last used. Sam held his hand near the vent, waiting for warmth before heading to his closet to find something more suitable. As expected, his clothing options were laughably unprepared for the cold. Floral shirts, cargo shorts, and swimwear made up most of his wardrobe. The only remotely useful pieces were a pair of linen pants and some old painter's coveralls. With no better choice, he layered both and wrapped himself in a thick blanket as an improvised coat. Sunlight streamed through the windows, bright and golden, completely contradicting the freezing air inside. Curiosity got the better of him, and Sam opened the front door to see what was happening outside. A blinding white glare forced him to shield his eyes. When his vision adjusted, what he saw made him freeze in disbelief. The vibrant greenery that had filled the landscape the day before had vanished, replaced by an unbroken stretch of white. Snow. And not just a light covering, several feet of it, reaching halfway up the door. Stunned, Sam pushed the glass door wider. Snow tumbled inside, covering the sandy footprints he had left behind the day before. This was real. He quickly shut the door, shivering as icy wind rushed in. This was beyond logic. Sam had only seen snow like this once, years ago, during a family trip up north. Never in a place like Key Harbor. Sam stumbled toward the kitchen window to check on the ocean. Normally, the sight of the waves brought him peace. Today, it unsettled him. The palm trees, golden sands, and deep blue waters had vanished. Everything was replaced by an endless white void. The horizon was gone, only an unbroken stretch of nothingness remained. His generator was safely stored in a compartment connected to the kitchen by a small door behind the fridge. He had designed the setup so he could access the generator from inside the house without exposing himself to the elements. It took some effort to move the refrigerator and even more to start the generator. But eventually, the furnace came back to life. Sam let out a sigh of relief. He had never once considered the possibility of freezing inside his own home. He turned on the television, but the screen was filled with static. No signal. The same problem persisted with the larger TV in the living room. Frustrated, Sam dropped onto the couch. The air was still cold, but at least he could no longer see his breath. He realized he needed to check his supplies. Most of his essentials were stored in the metal shed he shared with his neighbor Ben. That meant he would have to go outside eventually. He briefly wondered if Ben was all right, but mostly hoped he had restocked his supplies before the storm. Ben wasn't just his neighbor. He was also his supplier. Maybe even his friend, though Sam didn't always see it that way. As Sam debated whether to call Ben, a sudden, loud knocking on the front door made him jump. The pounding was strong enough to rattle the glass. Whoever was outside wasn't waiting. Someone was trying to push the door open against the piled-up snow. "Sam!" a voice called out, Ben's voice. He sounded terrified. Sam hurried to unlock the door, just as Ben, wearing chinos and a golf shirt, nearly collapsed into the house. He slammed the door shut behind him, locking it and leaning against it, gasping for breath. "What the hell, Ben?" Sam demanded. Ben didn't respond. His wide eyes darted around the room before he stumbled to a shelf, grabbed a bottle of bourbon, and took 2 large gulps. "Ben!" Sam called after him, following him into the living room. "Have you been outside?" Ben finally asked, his bloodshot eyes locking onto Sam's. Sam shrugged. "Not really. Just open the door. This is insane, right?" Ben took another deep swig, his hands shaking. "Insane? Man, you don't know what's out there." Sam couldn't get much more out of him. Ben collapsed into a chair, still clutching the bottle, mumbling under his breath. Sam figured he must have had a rough night. The combination of whatever he had taken and waking up to this bizarre weather had probably shaken him. Deciding to move on with his day, Sam wrapped Ben in a few blankets from the closet before focusing on his own clothing situation. Layering towels, socks, belts, and every shirt he owned, Sam ended up looking ridiculous, but felt warm enough to step outside. With a final glance at Ben, who was still muttering nonsense, Sam unlocked the door and started pulling it open. The bitter wind immediately found every weak spot in his makeshift outfit. He clenched his jaw, determined to make this quick. Before he could step outside, Ben suddenly lunged forward, slamming the door shut with his full weight. "What the hell, Ben?" Sam shouted, startled. "You can't go out there." Ben whispered frantically, his voice low and filled with fear. "There's things out there." Sam sighed in frustration. The world had literally frozen overnight, and now he had to deal with Ben's paranoia too. "Ben," Sam said as calmly as he could, resisting the urge to shake him. "Come sit down." Guiding Ben back to the couch, Sam tried to make eye contact. "There's always something out there, man. I get that this storm is weird. It's the storm of the century or whatever, but it's just snow." Ben shook his head vehemently. No, I can't let you go out there." Sam sighed and pulled out his last joint from a drawer in the coffee table. Lighting it up, the familiar scent of marijuana seemed to calm Ben somewhat. After a few puffs, he looked more grounded. Sam decided to seize the moment. "Ben, we can get through this. It's just a storm, but we need supplies from the shed, and someone has to go out there to get them." He hoped Ben would at least stay out of the way if he didn't want to help. With the snow piling up by the minute, the trek would only get harder. Ben took a long hit, then exhaled with an unsettling sincerity. "If you go out there, you won't come back." Sam sighed but kept his resolve. He went to the kitchen and returned with 2 walkie-talkies. Handing one to Ben, he said, "Listen, man, you're having a bad trip. Look at me." Ben met his eyes. "You know I wouldn't lie to you. There's nothing out there but crap weather. And in here, we've got nothing but Fritos and cornflakes. If we want to eat more than one miserable meal and keep the generator running, I have to go out there. Got it?" After a long pause, Ben reluctantly nodded. Sam wrapped himself in his makeshift snowsuit and prepared for the trek. Ben locked the door behind him. The instant Sam stepped outside, he regretted it. The snow was like cold, wet quicksand, and each step was a brutal workout. His snowsuit became soaked and quickly froze, digging into his skin like shards of ice. Sam's entire body throbbed with cold as he realized he needed to hurry or risk freezing to death in his own yard. He had walked this path 1,000 times and could navigate it blindfolded, at least in normal conditions. Today, the blinding snow disoriented him, turning the yard into an alien landscape. Frustration mounted as he repeatedly lost his bearings. Ben's voice crackled through the walkie-talkie. "I think you're going the wrong way," Ben warned. Sam gritted his teeth, the 20-second walk now stretching past 20 agonizing minutes. Desperate and numb, he fumbled for the walkie to admit defeat when he saw a hazy silhouette, the shed. He whispered a grateful prayer. His frozen fingers struggled with the combination lock. The irony stung. He had made it to the shed, but might freeze to death before getting inside. After several desperate attempts, a sharp smack broke the ice holding the lock shut, and he stumbled inside. The temperature in the shed was barely better, but Sam knew exactly what he needed. Spotting a box labeled Michigan, he clumsily stripped out of his icy clothes and squeezed into a thick ski suit from an old trip. The fit was tight. Years of lounging with beachside beers had left their mark, but the warmth was immediate. Sam sighed as his body temperature slowly normalized. Ben's voice crackled through the radio. "Sam, are you okay?" "Yeah," Sam breathed. "I made it. Had to change clothes. Thought I was gonna freeze out there." There was a long pause. Then Ben's voice returned, strained and trembling. "I think they're out there again." Sam clenched his jaw. "Not this again, Ben. There's nothing out there." "I'm telling you. Listen, I'm gathering what I can carry. I'll be back in a bit." Ben didn't respond, and Sam set to work. He filled a laundry basket with MREs, water, fuel tanks, and a few coats that might offer some warmth. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. As he prepared to leave, a sudden noise froze him in place. Thud! Something heavy hit the shed roof. At first, Sam thought it was ice or a frozen coconut from the trees. Whatever it was had significant weight, and it sent vibrations down the walls. Sam steadied himself, ready to open the shed door again when something unsettling happened. The roof started moving. Loud clicking sounds, like screwdrivers tapping against the metal, echoed above him. The sound was surreal, almost insect-like. Sam froze, hand hovering just shy of the handle. He strained to listen. Thud. A second impact landed on the roof. Now there were two of them, scuttling in circles above him. Sam's mind raced, filled with monstrous images from every horror movie he'd ever seen. He remembered the newscaster's warning, storm of the century. And worst of all, Ben. Ben must have seen something real, and that idiot let him walk straight into it. Ben's voice suddenly blared through the walkie-talkie, loud enough to shatter the tense silence. "Sam!" The creatures on the roof went silent, their movement ceasing. Sam fumbled to turn off the radio with his gloved hands, heart pounding. He bit off the glove with his teeth and managed to lower the volume just as Ben's voice crackled again. "There's something out there," Sam hissed back through clenched teeth. "I told you." Ben's frantic voice only fueled Sam's rage. "No, Ben, you did not tell me this. You said there were things. You didn't mention monsters." "Monsters? You've seen them?" "Oh God, Sam, they're monsters." Sam switched off the walkie-talkie, his nerves fraying. The scuttling resumed above him, sounding like creatures with multiple legs. Desperate, Sam grabbed a machete hanging by the door and lashed it to his belt. He hadn't planned on taking it, but now it seemed essential. After agonizing minutes, the eerie sounds faded. The creatures either leaped off the roof or flew away. Sam cautiously turned the radio back on. "Sam, oh thank God. I thought something happened to you." Ben's voice trembled. "You scared the crap out of me. Literally, I'm taking a dump right now." Sam grimaced. "Geez, Ben, TMI?" "I mean it, dude. Thought you were toast." Sam strapped a headlamp to his hood. "I'm heading back. Keep watch and guide me. You'll see the light on my head." He strapped tennis rackets to his feet with bungee cords and improvised attempt at snowshoes. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. The wind hit him as he stepped outside, though the ski suit insulated him from the worst of it. His progress was still slow, hampered by the load of supplies. Ben did his best to guide Sam through the blizzard, though he kept mixing up left and right. Sam was nearly halfway back to the driveway when something caught his eye off to the right. Despite the poor visibility, he saw a distinct color, red. Curious, he set down the basket and duffel bag and waded through the snow to investigate. His heart sank. It was blood, bright red, staining the pristine snow. The trail led off toward the Ashburns' property, an elderly couple who lived nearby. Sam hesitated. Should he follow it all the way? He wasn't sure, but it gnawed at him. After a few more steps, he decided it was best to return to the house, get organized, and form a plan. As he turned back, something near the trail caught his eye. Kneeling, Sam brushed away the snow to uncover a small, pale object. It was a finger. A jolt of shock ran through him as he cleared away more snow, revealing a severed hand beneath the surface. He quickly sheathed his machete and reached for the hand, hoping to find the rest of the body intact. To his horror, the hand came loose with ease. It had been cleanly separated at the wrist. Sam stumbled back, falling into the snow with a yell of fright. He flung the frozen limb away and scrambled to his feet, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Everything about this day had shifted from strange to terrifying to utterly unreal. Regaining his focus, Sam returned to his supplies, determined to free them from their icy prison. Suddenly, something zipped past his head. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but when it happened again, he knew better. The sound was high-pitched and unsettling, like an enormous insect. Not just big, more like the size of a small animal. For a brief second, Sam wondered if it was a drone. But he tightened his grip on the machete, scanning the swirling fog. His entire body was on edge, ready to strike at anything that moved. He refused to be the next victim, like Handy, as he'd already named the unfortunate soul to whom the severed hand once belonged. Now and then, he thought he saw something darting through the air and swung his blade wildly, but nothing solid came close. Then, his walkie-talkie crackled to life. "Sam, you there?" Ben's voice called, tense with worry. "Yeah, I'm here. Can you see me?" Sam adjusted the beam of his headlamp. "Barely." Ben replied anxiously. "Do you see anything else out there?" Sam clenched his jaw. "Like what, Ben? Creatures? Can you stop? That's not helping." Ben hesitated. I just see you, but you need to hurry." That, at least, they agreed on. "I'm heading for the back door," Sam said. "Be ready to open up." "Got it." Balancing the duffel bag and laundry basket awkwardly, Sam kept his machete at the ready. The backyard, usually a small patch of grass with beach sand around it, was now a towering snowfield. By the time he reached the house, the snow had climbed up to the gutters. "Ben," Sam sighed into the walkie-talkie, "we've got another problem. The back door is buried. I'm going around to the front." Before he could finish his sentence, something heavy and white hurtled through the air, striking the walkie-talkie from his hand. It skidded across the roof, out of reach. A surge of panic coursed through Sam as he sensed multiple figures moving just beyond his line of sight. With a sharp breath, he swung the machete at the swirling snow. He caught glimpses of something white and covered in fur, but it had to be a trick of the light. Whatever was out there was big, fast, and circling him. He had no time to waste. He had to get inside, now. Ben's voice crackled faintly from the abandoned walkie-talkie, but Sam ignored it. Dragging the supplies, he kept his back to the house, inching toward the front door while taking defensive swings at the shifting figures around him. His breath came in short, sharp gasps, and sweat slicked his skin despite the cold. Rounding the corner, he spotted Ben waiting by the front door. Ben's expression was grim, his hand steady as he reached out. Sam shoved the basket and duffel bag forward. Ben grabbed them. And Sam was nearly inside when something sharp and ice-cold tore through his suit. A sudden force yanked him off his feet, pulling him into the snow. His body hit the ground hard, knocking the air from his lungs. Panic took hold as he realized his machete was gone. He gasped for breath when one of the creatures landed directly on top of him. Time slowed, and it felt as though he was watching himself from the outside. The thing was unlike anything he had ever encountered, a bizarre fusion of insect and arachnid. It had 8 legs, glossy black eyes, and brittle white hairs that blended seamlessly with the snow. Each hair bristled like tiny needles. Its most striking feature, however, was its wings, silver and white, resembling those of a dragonfly, vibrating rapidly as it cocked its head, watching him. Sam's pulse pounded as the creature spread its mandibles, revealing jagged rows of teeth. This was it. He had no idea how fast it would happen. Would it strike in one swift motion, or would he endure something far worse? Then, in an instant, a blur of movement cut through the moment. Ben appeared from nowhere, swinging the machete with fierce precision. The blade struck true, slicing through the creature's body. A thick blue substance sprayed from the creature as it let out an ear-splitting shriek. Its body convulsed before falling still. The strange liquid froze upon contact with Sam's suit, and a single drop that touched his cheek burned sharply, freezing his skin like acid. A shudder ran through him at the thought of what more of it could do. Ben grabbed Sam's arm and yanked him toward the house. Dizzy and breathless, Sam did his best to move. They stumbled into the foyer, slamming the door shut and locking it. Both collapsed, panting, their eyes locked in silent disbelief. For the next 2 hours, they worked tirelessly, dismantling cabinets, doors, and bookshelves to salvage wood for barricading the windows. Despite their best efforts, there wasn't enough material to seal every opening. Sam had to improvise, using the entertainment center as a makeshift barricade. By the time they were finished, the house was as fortified as it could be. But outside, the snow continued to rise, threatening to trap them entirely. If those creatures relied on flight alone, they might be safe. But if they could dig, well, that was another story. Around 6 in the evening, they finally sat down to eat. Though the clock showed it was early evening, darkness had already taken over. Upon further inspection, they realized the entire house was now buried, cutting off all natural light. They ate their freeze-dried meals in silence. Afterward, Ben fiddled with a hand-crank radio, while Sam treated the blackened spot on his cheek with aloe. The radio crackled to life. A deep, gravelly voice came through. "I don't know. Nobody knows. But they're everywhere. All I can say is, stay out of the snow. I repeat, stay out of the snow." Sam's pulse quickened as the voice continued. "U.S. Interstate 1 is impassable at all bridges, not just the Key West connector. Don't even try it. We've been receiving sporadic reports, but information is scarce. Some residents in the northern Keys are reporting cell service returning, but..." The transmission cut out. Ben frantically cranked the handle again while Sam reached for his last bottle of whiskey. The good stuff. He'd been saving it for a special occasion, and now seemed like as good a time as any. The radio crackled back to life. "Don't let it come into contact with you. They're extremely vulnerable to heat. If you can create fire, you can destroy them. But do not allow their blood to touch you. It's dangerous and can cause immediate harm or even be fatal. We've gathered at Boot Key High School Gymnasium, just north of the 7-mile bridge. If you can make it here safely, there's space, but..." The signal cut off again. Ben didn't bother trying to get it back this time. "What the hell are we supposed to do, man?" Ben asked, his voice shaking. Sam shook his head. He didn't have an answer. His emergency survival guide didn't cover massive airborne ice insects. "I guess we survive," Sam said weakly. "It's Florida. It has to warm back up, right?" Ben didn't look convinced. "But what if it doesn't? What if this storm is just the beginning?" Before Sam could answer, the sharp sound of shattering glass from the kitchen sent a chill through both of them. "The back door," Sam whispered. They hadn't boarded it up since it was already buried under the snow and might serve as an escape route if necessary. Sam grabbed his machete while Ben armed himself with a homemade flamethrower, a lighter strapped to an aerosol can. Turning the corner, Sam saw fragments of broken glass and snow scattered across the kitchen floor. Among them was a writhing ice bug, its body twitching and screeching in agony from the warmth of the house. The sight was horrifying. The creature struggled, attempting to fly or crawl, but kept collapsing. After several unbearable moments, it spontaneously burst into flames before crumbling into ash. Sam and Ben stood frozen in shock. "Well, that was informative," Sam muttered, his heart still pounding. Two crucial facts stood out. One, the creatures were incredibly sensitive to heat, just as the voice on the radio had warned. And two, the ice bug had managed to dig its way inside. They examined the crude tunnel it had created. Narrow and jagged, it was only wide enough for a small animal, but it was clear evidence that the creatures were aware of them. With no better option, they wedged the dining table from IKEA against the back door. It fit so snugly that neither of them could move it once it was in place. By 9:30, they collapsed onto the couch, leaning against each other, physically and emotionally drained. They had intended to take turns keeping watch, but Sam's legs were aching from his earlier hike, and Ben was fighting off both a whiskey hangover and mental exhaustion. Neither lasted long before drifting into sleep. Several hours later, Sam woke up to Ben violently shivering beside him. It was impossible to tell the time. It was pitch dark and the house was unbearably cold. The power had gone out again. "Ben," Sam whispered, no response. He tried again, a little louder, still nothing. "Ben!" On the third attempt, Ben bolted upright, shouting, "Sammy!" into the darkness. Sam froze, realizing that Ben had just called out his son's name. Sammy had passed away in a car accident when he was just 3 years old. Ben had been behind the wheel. It was a name Ben never spoke, not even in his drunken ramblings, except once, years ago, at a funeral. "Ben," Sam said gently, placing a hand on his friend's arm. Ben was shaking, his quiet sobs piercing the silence. Sam reached for the flashlight on the table with his free hand and managed to switch it on. The beam illuminated Ben's face, his wide, terrified eyes barely holding back his emotions. "I'm fine," Ben mumbled. "We have to get fuel for the generator. We'll freeze if we don't." Sam nodded. But before they could move, an eerie sound paralyzed them both, clicking, chittering, and rustling. The ice bugs had returned. Ben was the first to act. His fear vanished as he grabbed the makeshift flamethrower. In an instant, a 6-foot stream of fire erupted across the room, revealing a swarm of ice bugs crawling and flying around them. The sight burned itself into Sam's memory. At least 6 bugs were instantly incinerated, while the rest scrambled over each other, trying to escape the flames. Their shrieks formed a deafening, nightmarish chorus that shook the walls. They were trapped. The bugs covered every surface, every wall, every inch of space. Fire was the only thing keeping them at bay, but Sam knew it wouldn't last. Ben's voice cut through the panic. "The generator! We need heat!" Sam's mind raced. The house, now drenched in darkness, felt vast and unfamiliar. Where had he left the fuel can? "The kitchen!" Ben shouted, suddenly remembering. Sam grabbed the flashlight and machete, doing his best to light the way as Ben forced a path forward with bursts of flame. They moved cautiously, but just as they reached the kitchen entrance, something sharp slashed through the air. A sudden, searing pain tore through Sam's ear as the creature's claws nearly severed it. He screamed and swung his blade wildly, striking nothing but the doorframe. Ben, startled by Sam's reaction, misfired. The flames caught the kitchen drapes, which had been tossed near 2 small diesel canisters. The fabric ignited instantly. Amid the chaos of shrieking ice bugs and consuming darkness, both men came to the same grim realization at the exact same moment. They exchanged a look of understanding just before the explosion ripped through the house. The blast hurled them backward into the living room as wood, drywall, and debris rained down. The initial detonation was devastating, but it triggered a deadly chain reaction as the ice bugs ignited one by one, their explosive pops creating a sound like an enormous popcorn machine. Sam might have thought it was over until the main gas line caught fire. The second explosion was catastrophic, obliterating most of the house in an instant. The force shook the ground, sending burning wreckage flying in all directions. Sam and Ben were buried beneath a mountain of debris, their bodies battered and barely responsive. Neither could move for several agonizing minutes, slipping in and out of consciousness. Ben was the first to stir, groaning in agony as he realized a half-inch piece of steel rebar had pierced his calf. His cries of pain snapped Sam back to reality. Sam wasn't in much better shape. Several cracked ribs and a dislocated shoulder left him barely able to move. But despite the overwhelming pain, sheer survival instinct forced them to crawl out from beneath the wreckage. Emerging from the remains of Sam's fragmented home, they were greeted by a scene of utter devastation. Sam looked around in disbelief. His home, his memories, were reduced to broken, burning pieces scattered across the snow. It felt surreal, incomprehensible. Surely, this had to be a nightmare. Any moment now, he would wake up, start the coffee maker, and laugh at the ridiculousness of it all. A blizzard in Florida, flying snow spiders, it was absurd. Ben, however, seemed to have clarity that Sam hadn't yet grasped. Through sheer will and mutual support, Sam and Ben managed to retreat to the only part of the house still standing, the bedroom. By some twist of fate, it was relatively undamaged, with 4 intact walls, a roof, and, most importantly, a door. Despite the fires raging just outside, the cold crept in quickly. Snow was pouring into the charred remains of the house, rapidly dousing the flames. They needed a fire to survive. Sam had no qualms about sacrificing his paperback beach reads and bedsheets. While Ben worked on starting a fire, Sam tried to fashion a makeshift sling for his injured arm using a t-shirt. His shoulder throbbed painfully, and though he knew it needed to be popped back into place, he couldn't summon the courage to try. Riggs' technique from Lethal Weapon didn't exactly seem reliable. Ben, ever resourceful, got a small fire going. Sam marveled at how the man always seemed to have a lighter on him, but the burning books produced thick black smoke, choking them within minutes. "We need ventilation," Ben said grimly. They reluctantly moved the fire near the bedroom door and cracked it open a few inches. The smoke curled out while the heat stayed in. The fire also acted as a barrier against the snowbugs, which flittered about in the shadows beyond the doorway. Exhausted, Sore and shivering despite the fire, the two men couldn't fight sleep any longer. After throwing the last of the flammable materials onto the flames, they lay on the floor, holding hands in a silent truce. Sam's last lucid thought was grim. I wonder if I'll freeze to death or get eaten. And then, almost absurdly, I wish I had a gun. His dreams were filled with violent images of splattering blue blood and flying monstrosities. He woke to sharp pain in his shoulder and pins and needles shooting down his numb arm. What actually woke him, however, was a thin stream of sunlight warming his face. Sam blinked, disoriented. The room was warmer, maybe 60 degrees. Not tropical by any means, but far better than the Arctic conditions they'd endured. He had apparently fallen asleep using Ben's lap as a pillow. The big guy was slouched to the side, still motionless. "Ben," Sam whispered, shaking his arm gently. Ben didn't respond. Sam shook him harder, dread creeping into his chest. "Ben, wake up!" It took a painfully long moment for Sam to realize the truth. Checking Ben's pulse confirmed it. There was none. Tears blurred Sam's vision as he checked again, praying he was wrong. But the outcome didn't change. His neighbor, weed dealer, and sometime friend had succumbed during the night. Sam couldn't tell if it was hypothermia, blood loss, or a combination of the two. Maybe it was internal injuries from the explosion. Who knew? What he did know was that Ben was dead. Sam swallowed his grief and forced himself to his feet, stepping over the charred spot on the floor and pushing open the debris-wedged door. It took considerable effort, but he managed to squeeze through. Emerging into the remnants of the hallway, Sam's eyes widened in disbelief. The vibrant greens of the island had returned, interspersed with patches of snow. The once pristine white landscape was now a chaotic mix of slushy drifts and brilliant hues. Streams of melting snow water ran in all directions, and the ocean, though much further up the beach than before, was visible once again. The sight was balm for Sam's battered soul. He stumbled toward the shore, climbing over rubble and debris. At the water's edge, he fell to his knees, running his good hand through the sand. Chunks of ice floated out to deeper waters. The nightmare seemed to be over. Tears came in a flood, and Sam buried his head in his lap. The overwhelming sense of loss and relief was too much to contain. He sobbed uncontrollably, his body racked with grief. But the moment was short-lived. A sudden blast of frigid wind slammed into Sam, nearly knocking him over. Cursing under his breath, he wiped the moisture from his eyes. And then he saw it. Snow, falling heavily from the sky, swirling in thick, relentless waves. Sam's heart sank. It was starting all over again. Days turned into weeks, and the storm eventually passed. But the scars it left behind were deep. Sam stood on the beach, staring at the remnants of his home, now a pile of rubble. The vibrant colors of Key Harbor had returned, but the memories of that fateful day haunted him. He had lost Ben, his friend, and the weight of that loss pressed heavily on his heart. The community rallied together to rebuild, but Sam felt like a ghost among the living. He often found himself looking up at the sky, half expecting the snow to return, half hoping it wouldn't. As the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Sam made a silent promise to himself. He would honor Ben's memory by living fully, embracing the warmth of life, and never taking a single day for granted again. But deep down, he knew that the shadows of that storm would always linger, a reminder of the fragility of peace in a world that could turn cold in an instant.